All right. What did you notice? Impervious surfaces. Okay, so those are the hard surfaces like rooftops, maybe paths, depending on if they're paved or not, driveways that go all the way to the lake. Yeah. If you're going to have an impervious surface, where's the best place to have it? You got it. As far away from the lake as possible. We want to provide space and time so that when water runs off that roof, maybe through a gutter and downspout, that it has some time before it gets to the lake, that it has a good chance to soak in. Yeah. What else did you notice? Sure. One is farther back. One is very close to the water. Yep. Yeah. Algae bloom. Yes. And why do you think that algae bloom is there? No buffer. And what happened because these trees and shrubs were taken out? What's that? Yep, erosion. Do you see where that erosion went? Besides it fueled the algae bloom? Yeah. There's certainly some in the water. It probably makes the water cloudier. And we've got a layer of soil sediment on the bottom. Why does that matter? Fish. You just suffocated some of the fish nests along the shoreline because the sediment went on top of them and then the eggs couldn't get oxygen, so they don't hatch. Yep. What else do you notice? Yeah. Wood in the water over here. Yep. What's that good for? Good fish habitat. When I talk to the fisheries biologists, they say better than fish cribs because there's more structure. There's all those branches. Initially, there's leaves and needles. Yes. Thank you, Karen. It's also good bird habitat, both birds that perch along these and for the heron here who eats the fish that are on the fish sticks or fish hotels. Yeah. Turtles love to sit on them too. That's our turtles. Frogs sometimes, frogs along the shoreline. Yes. I didn't hear that. Bat habitat. Okay, great. Thank you. I didn't think about that. Maybe we can add a bat to it. Yeah. There's geese over here. What happens when you have geese there? They provide their own fertilizer. Has anybody seen the video about, I believe it's Sebastian the goose? How long does it take from beak to butt after they eat the grass? 7 to 9 minutes. You got it. And if you look closely at the poster, there is goose poop here too. We wanted to be realistic. They're attracted to grass. They love to eat grass. And they'll avoid this sort of thing. Does anybody know why they avoid buffers? Predators, exactly. They don't know who's in there. Maybe somebody bigger than them. Yep. Okay, so they love lawns. So there we go. What else do you notice? No red fish over here. Red fish over here, orange fish, blue fish, green fish. Over here, just green fish. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Yes. Okay, I think you've hit on most of it. Thank you. Come on. It's frozen. You could be there or there. Either one would work. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so this is the poster that's sitting at the back. We printed it in two sizes. We printed this size, which is an 8.5 by 11 times 2. The idea is this could be a handout for people you want to share it with. We also printed the bigger size, which is meant to be a poster. We printed those to go at town halls, community centers, wherever lots of people could see it. I distributed a bunch of the big posters to teachers this morning at the Wisconsin Science Teachers Conference. Okay, so on the left-hand side, you noticed that the house was set farther back. That's because there's shoreland zoning there. Shoreland zoning in most cases requires a 75-foot setback, and that is what allows the space for the buffer, the trees, the shrubs, the native plants along the shoreline. On the right-hand side, this is what we can see if there's no shoreland zoning. The house can be very close to the water. We can have erosion. We can have driveways that run all the way to the water. Obviously, we're going to have runoff from those as well. Okay, so what difference does this make? You've talked about a number of the things. One is property values. What happens if we have a structure like this on your lake? How does it affect the property owner? How does it affect the other people around the lake? Property values. Sure. So the property values here, this is essentially fertilizing the lake. We know that in Wisconsin, most of our lawn and garden soils have excessive phosphorus. That's what the testing has shown. So you wash a bunch of that into the lake and you wash a bunch of phosphorus in the lake. We know that 1 pound of phosphorus results in up to 500 pounds of algae. There's a lot of phosphorus in the amount of soil that was lost there. We've got erosion problems, obviously. So that's going to affect fish beds in that area, but the phosphorus is going to affect throughout the lake in terms of eutrophication. It's like dumping a bag of fertilizer in the lake. We have this publication, which has been popular, Protecting Your Waterfront Investment, 10 Steps You Can Take. And we know that clear water, which clear water is higher property values, depends on hard surfaces, how much hard surface or impervious surface per lot, and do we keep the buffer in place, or does this happen? Okay, impervious surfaces, lots of impervious surface here, very close to the lake. Probably some of this is going to erode and get past the silt fence into the lake. Driveways are also impervious surface. The research has found that even a gravel driveway, after it's been driven over for 6 months or more, is almost as impervious as an asphalt driveway. We can also think about impervious surfaces as deserts. From the point of view of a frog or a bird or any other wildlife, this patio has no food, no shelter, no water. If you're a little frog hopping across there, you're easy prey because there's no place to go and you don't have what you need. When we think about fish need habitat. 2 types of habitat: physical structure. So this is your aquatic plants, your fallen trees, your woody habitat, and the substrate, the bottom of the lake. A number of our fish depend on a sandy or rocky bottom. If we have a bunch of sedimentation, a bunch of erosion, it's going to cover over those areas, and then it's harder for the eggs to get oxygen. So what the physical structure, what's right along the shoreline that the fish depend on, is waterfront property owners and their choices. The water quality side of it, which fish also depends on the entire watershed and what people are doing in the watershed in order to have clear water, avoid that sedimentation, and have a healthy level of aquatic plants and oxygen and temperature. Fish are indicators. Healthy lakes have lots of fish species, and less healthy lakes have few or no fish species. We have a number of studies in Wisconsin now tracking the fish species over time, and we do have some fish species that are disappearing in certain lakes because of changes to those lakes. Okay, so we're going to play a little fish game. I've got 6 fish up here. pick one of the fish that looks appealing to you or that you're interested in, and then keep that name in mind as we go through this exercise. Okay, I assume everybody has their fish by now. I'm not going to tell you a lot about these fish up front. You know some of them. So the question is, how does our footprint on the land affect the fish? Up top, we've got a road, then we've got a wooded lot, and then a lake or a river down at the bottom. So someone wants to develop this lake, they bring in a logging machine, they start cutting trees, then they bring in a bulldozer. Joop, 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 joop. They put in a driveway and a house. How do you think that type of development is going to affect the fish? Not so much. Why? Has a big setback. There's a lot of trees between the house and the lake. Yep. Okay. So this is based on a study of 47 warm water streams in Wisconsin. This lot, as it's shown, is 7% of it is impervious or hard surface. And the fisheries biologist found that all fish survived. With this level of development, there were no noticeable impacts on fish. So we can have homes on the shoreline and lots of fish if we build carefully. Let's say someone else purchases this lot and they go about their development. Bring in the bulldozer, driveway, house, footprint at 10%. How do you think this affects the fish? Probably a little more than the last one. Might impact some of the fish. Yes. These are the fish that were eliminated when 10% of the watershed was impervious surface. Did your fish die? Some did. Okay, which fish died? Black crappie? Okay. All right, I think you're probably getting the idea here. Now what? Getting too close to the water, yeah, bigger footprint. 15% of this lot is impervious. Lots of fish died. Probably most of your fish died. Okay, that's what we found in terms of the impact of impervious surface on our fish, and that's why we're losing some of the fish. Okay, so why is this happening? We have an undeveloped lot on the left. The arrows are from left to right, runoff, phosphorus, and sediment. In the middle, we've got that moderately developed lot. The runoff and phosphorus stay about the same. We do get more sediment going into the water. And on the right-hand side, a heavily developed lot, probably 15% or more, we see we get a lot more runoff, which leads to a lot more phosphorus going to the lake and 18 times as much sediment. Okay, here's the summary of what the fisheries biologists found. Less than 8% impervious, like that first sketch, we have lots of fish and lots of fish species. 8 to 12%, we lose this group of fish. Greater than 12%, we lose this and this. Did anybody choose the brook stickleback for their fish? Okay, do you know the brook stickleback at all? Okay, have you ever heard of a brook stickleback club, like a walleye club? No. They get to be about 3 inches long as adults. So that's probably why there's no brook stickleback club, though maybe there should be. I didn't know anything about the brook stickleback, but I asked the fisheries biologist who works down the hall from me, what's a brook stickleback? He told me they live just north of our building in ephemeral ponds that dry up in the middle of summer. And I thought, he said they survive by, as their pond dries up, they flop across the land into a nearby stream. So they're good floppers. That's one way they survive. The other thing is when the water quality gets just plain crummy, they can breathe air. They can come to the top and breathe air. They're one of the only fish that I've ever heard of that can do that. So they are very resilient. They can survive just about anything. But that's not true of some of our other fish, most of our other fish. A study of lakes in Wisconsin found this same trend. More impervious surfaces, fewer fish. Okay, a little case study on northern pike. You might know that northern pike and walleye are both considered cool water fish. They don't need water as cold as trout do, but they do need cool water. We know when we have more impervious surfaces, we get warmer water. You walk across asphalt in the summer or a dark colored roof, and the water is going to be warm coming off of it. If water doesn't hit an impervious surface, if it soaks into the ground, not only does it not get heated up, but the ground cools it down. The ground is like an underwater refrigerator, cools the water down, and then slowly feeds it into the lake or stream throughout the summer. So when you have that dry period, when you haven't had rain in 2 or 3 weeks, the cool groundwater is still flowing in. But if you have too much impervious surface, that doesn't work. Okay, in the summer of 2012, we had a number of lakes across Wisconsin where northern pike were going belly up. The people around the lake called the DNR and said, fix it, we don't want dead fish. DNR staff went out to many of these lakes. They collected water samples. They tested for the common pollutants that kill fish, things like manure, fertilizer, gasoline, diesel, antifreeze. They didn't find any of those things in those water samples. So why are the fish dying? Well, it turns out it was temperature. The lethal temperature for northern pike is 84 to 86 degrees. The temperature that was measured at the surface of these lakes was 90 degrees. It was just plain too hot. The heat was killing the fish. Can the DNR fix that? Fix lakes that are too hot? When I ask this to elementary students, they say, yeah, bring on the ice trucks. I wish we had enough ice trucks to take care of that, but we don't. So these are the counties that had northern pike kills, and the DNR can't fix these lakes when they get too hot. We, as a group, can help these lakes by not having so much impervious surface that heats up the water. Okay, so back to our poster. When we have more trees and native plants along the shoreline, when we have that buffer in place, it holds the shoreline in place. It's stable rather than eroding. So we've got less water pollution. As a result, we've got less algae growth. Here's where we get our algae. You've probably seen something like this. Buffers, native plants, trees, shrubs have deep roots, 12, 15 feet deep, deeper than a person is tall, compared to our bluegrass, which has roots that are only an inch or two deep, and so just can't hold, that much soil in place. So that's the value there. When our buffers are removed, we can have severe erosion problems. And it's a combination of erosion, just the soil going in. Remember, we said soil has high levels of phosphorus, or fertilizer going in, chemical fertilizer. It's that middle number that's the phosphorus. So this one's 10, 0, 10. So it's a fertilizer without any phosphorus in it. We know that 1 pound of phosphorus can result in 500 pounds of algae growth. We also passed a law as a state in 2010 saying you can't apply fertilizer containing phosphorus to lawns unless you qualify for an exemption. Does anybody remember what the exemptions are? You're just starting your lawn. It's the first year. Yep, that's one. And the second one is you have a soil test that says your soil is actually low in phosphorus. So you need some fertilizer to have healthy grass. Very rare, but it might happen. Okay, so what can buffers do if they're big enough? Well, I think the main point here is our 35-foot buffer that we have isn't big enough to accomplish a lot of these things, like keeping the bacteria from geese out of the water. Like protecting our spawning beds in most cases. Okay. How are we doing time-wise? We have 10 minutes. Okay, I'm going to go quickly here. When we have no buffer, we have fewer fish and we have fewer frogs. We also have fewer loons when we lose the water clarity. These are the shoreline standards. A 35-foot buffer, 75 feet back for structure setback. Does anybody come from a county that used to have higher standards for shoreland zoning? Okay, I see some hands. In Wisconsin, we had 54 of 71 counties that have shoreland zoning that had higher standards. In 2015, the Wisconsin legislature said counties may not have higher standards. So all those higher standards, maybe for larger lot sizes or larger setbacks, were eliminated. I think I'm going to skip down. I just said 54 counties. In 2015, the legislature in the budget bill said counties cannot have higher standards. We have a court case from last year that says counties and towns, well, it's a town case, can have larger lot size requirements via subdivision ordinances. That's the Newbold case. Let me know if you'd like more information about that. And last month, we had a new bill introduced. There were sheets about it on the back table, just the first page of the bill. It's AB 1110. And I want to talk a little bit about that. It returns local control of shoreland zoning by eliminating that provision that prohibits counties from being more restrictive. It also allows DNR to provide opinions on and appeal of shoreland variance decisions. So this was introduced last month by Representative Shankland, who's a Wisconsin lake leader. It's currently co-authored by 10 representatives and 5 senators. I called Shankland's office. They said she's looking to build a bipartisan support. She will reintroduce the bills next session if the political landscape looks similar. Her staffer said now is a good time. If you're interested in having stronger shoreland zoning, that now is a good time to contact legislators because they're out of session. So now is a time when they can gather information and think about where they're at, listen to constituents. Okay. So the posters are on the back table. If you have other things that you're interested in, other publications, let me know. My office is right here in town, so I can run there in the morning, pick up some more publications and bring them for you. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Mike.
Okay, so I have about 7 minutes or so, and I won't get between you and the rest of the day. So thank you, Lynn. And these are, again, popular products that Lynn has produced. They're at the DNR table where I will be. It's just down the main hall to the left when you get to the main hall. There we go. Whoops, too fast. Okay, so as Mike mentioned, my name is Mike Wenholz. I am the Wisconsin DNR Shoreland Program Coordinator. The primary thing that we work on is shoreline zoning, and this is the team. Dale Rezebek and myself are the two that are full-time, dedicated strictly to zoning. Kay Lutzi, who had this position before I did, she's a supervisor. The last bunch of years, she had been double duty. And so she's not supposed to be spending day-to-day work in shoreline zoning, even though she loves it. And so she will be helping us out in a lot of ways, but not on a day-to-day basis with any specific county coverage. And then Kathy helps out. She's primarily a different position, but she helps out with some shoreline zoning more or less on an as-need basis. So that's the team. And then Lynn is a de facto non-DNR part of our team. So I wanted to just cover a couple things here. Remember that it's all rule based. So Rules start in, at least in our state and most states, with a statute. This is the statute that's super important for shoreline zoning. It's statute 281.31, and it's called the Navigable Waters Protection Law. And the main thing that's important is that it spells out the purposes right here. These 5 things are spelled out specifically in statute as to what shoreline zoning these are the purposes. This is why we have shoreline zoning. These are the things that it's supposed to do. Maintain safe and healthful conditions, prevent and control water pollution, protect spawning grounds, fish and aquatic life, control building sites, the placement of structures, the types of land uses in these shoreland areas, and then reserve shore cover and natural beauty, which oftentimes that last piece gets forgotten about. But it's honestly interesting because it's one of the first things that people say why they like our lakes and rivers, and being by a lake or river is natural scenic beauty. And that's why it's in here. So I just wanted to point this out because it's important to understand this is what the legislature, when they developed this, these are the purposes of what we're trying to accomplish. I'm going to skip over this for time's sake. If you happen to be, there's a special rule for the Lower St. Croix Riverway. It's got its own statute. If that applies to you, please come, and you have questions about that, please come and talk to me. But I think that's an extremely tiny percentage of the people that are at this conference. These are the first one, NR 115. So this is now the statute provides the basis for the administrative code, which is more, it's supposed to be where more of the nuts and bolts are of the day-to-day pieces of the rule. So those statutes, that one I shared is really the basis for all of these. The one that you're probably most familiar with that we talk gets the most attention is the county shoreline zoning, which is under NR 115. It has its own statute, 59.692. That's where a lot of those changes that Lynn was talking about were made directly. And this is implemented by a county ordinance. NR 117 is for cities and villages, and 115 is in unincorporated areas. Incorporated areas, so your cities, your villages, that's a shoreline wetland zoning. It has a few rules compared to 115. It's much smaller, but that's what NR 117 is. That special rule for the St. Croix Riverway is NR 118. It has its own statute. But the thing that's important is that these are all implemented in local ordinances. And that's what I want to say here. Shoreline zoning is implemented by local jurisdictions, county, village. The Riverway can have a town, but it's villages, cities, and especially counties for shoreline zoning by their own locally adopted ordinances and their own locally adopted with state guidelines on the process. So this is important because a lot of times people think, well, you got to call the DNR to get something done in shoreline zoning. We will assist you and point you in the direction, but I'm telling you right now, save yourself a call. Don't call us directly. If you call Dale or I, guess what we're going to do? Well, you're going to need to talk to whoever your county zoning person is, because that's the process. That's the ordinance, and that's the process. There's some people get confused on this. There's no, if you need a variance and you go to the Board of Adjustment, there's no state Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment is at your county level or at your city or village level. So what do? What is our role? Right in these rules, because these are state mandated rules to the local level. They had to have a state presence to be able to assist. So that's our primary role spelled out in these rules, is to assist. It's to assist those local jurisdictions both to develop and implement those rules. And as part of that, it's to ensure that those state regulations are actually being followed and met and being implemented. And so specifically, here's the list of, if you really break down on a day-to-day, what do we do? This is what Dale and I and our program does. This is what we do. Provide that technical guidance, policy guidance. We help those local jurisdictions both develop and finalize their local ordinances so they can be adopted and certified A big thing we do is if there is a local Shoreland zoning request, a variance request, a rezone request, conditional use or special exception request, we will help and make comments on that and help in that way. And we, as Lynn was talking about with that new potential bill that's out there, we'll see where that goes, but it's to keep abreast of those types of things. There's new rules. Sometimes these are broadcast well, sometimes we find out about them sort of last minute. And then it's like, drop everything and start commenting, as Mike is also well aware. And then we monitor local compliance, as I said. So it's just a very brief overview. Lynn provided the whys, and this is what we're trying to do, much more visually pleasant than mine, but there is the rule component, and that's just the world we live in. So there has to be the rules, or you wouldn't, it'd be entirely on just the goodwill of everyone to do the things that Lynn was talking about. So with that said, if you have any specific questions for me, I will be at the table until 4 o'clock, and I'll also be here tonight. If you want to just tap me, I'll be here a little bit in the morning until about noon tomorrow, but feel free to tap me. Here's my number and information, and Dale as well. So thank you.
And just a few more announcements. If you would like to be on a list for updates, this part of the room right here hasn't gotten the yellow pad yet. So if you want to sign up before you leave, there's a yellow pad working its way around. If you want more copies of this, first of all, feel free to grab everything that's on the back table. I brought them so you would take them home. But if you want 50 or 100 or whatever you need for your lake group, come talk to me and we'll start a list, and I can either bring them to you tomorrow or mail them. The same is true for the other waterfront publications. Let me know what you need and I can get them to you. And I will be at the authors event with a few fish books, some for kids, some for adults. We do have recent books about bluegills and Iowa darters. We're working on one about smallmouth bass. Also, if you work with kids, we have a lakeshore journal in large quantities that kids can fill out. So if you're interested in that, let me know. And I think that's all. Thank you very much for coming. We'll be up here for questions. Yes.
Thanks to both of you. And so that's the end of the sessions, except I believe it's in this room. We'll be having some lightning talks here in just a short little bit. So enjoy the posters, and we hope to see you at the banquet this evening.
I have a question for you. So, I'm on Pickle Crane. So there's a house that gets rebuilt. It's a tear down. And it's a very small lot. Not exactly. It's probably 90% improvements. Is that it's on that ordinance level that they can build?
This is one of the big things that was done in 2015. Is basically that was a non-gated conforming structure. It doesn't meet the foundational structure.
Yeah, it wasn't open.
Before 68, there were no rules. That's when the source was. But built before that, there was no rules. And anything that changed that was grandfathered. And so what happened is this last legislature, they said, you don't even need a park. She's going to be in the fire plan. But it's a big deal for the county. There's no tracking that they said. They completely took that out. You can just rebuild it. It could even be a different use unless you're counting. I just learned this because this came up the other day. They could turn it, literally, here's the extreme example, but it was a storage shed. They could turn it into a cabin. They could turn it into, this was the example. I was like, what? Really, they could change the use. So I go, let me use an extreme one to make sure that they could turn it into a brothel. And they said, she said, yes. And I go, okay, plus the county has something. So they, that was one of the big things.
Right, it has to have storage underneath for the water to go in. But it needs to be
fair to the legislature on that particular issue.
This isn't just a Shoreland thing.
Sand and other stuff from flooding on top of.
that zoning actually needs it to be. You can't have local rules and then say, well, we're never gonna make that person actually change. You could kind of nullify all the changes over time. If there's no appetite. So my guess is, this is just a total guess, that there will eventually be a Supreme Court case somewhere that rises up and just basically challenges the whole. And then I don't know, it'd be a new world order because you can't just do zoning and just ignore non-conforming. This changes so many of the rules.
Yeah. And who does the enforcement? You know, like